today, and as a coastal naturalist, I represent BC Ferries and Parks Canada, two organizations who are your guides in helping you discover these coastlines and stewards in helping you to protect them. So on behalf of BC Ferries and Parks Canada, and of course on behalf of myself, I'd like to welcome all of you to coastal BC, a place of remarkable beauty, diversity, and wonder, and there's no better place to start discovering coastal BC with us right here and right now. So this is my storyteller, and I'm hoping you know what this is. Does anybody know? I'm wearing otter, yes. This is an otter, very good. I also get beaver, I get seal, I get everything, so that's fine, it's all worth a guess. Now, there are two types of otters in British Columbia. I'm going to ask you another question. Do you guys know what those two species are? Do you know? Yes? River otter and sea otter, very good. We've got an otter expert. Now, it's one thing to be able to know their names, but it's another to be able to identify them. So, more otter trivia for you today. So I'll show you this picture, and you have a 50-50 chance. You get it wrong, not a big deal. We're just on the ferry. So hands up if you think that this is a sea otter, okay? Raise your hand if you think that this is a sea otter. Any votes? A few votes. Sure, okay. And what about a river otter? Anybody want to vote for river? Oh, you more for river? So it is a river otter. So at this point I hear like fist pumping or something like that. But you got a 50-50 chance, so it's okay. And this is the sea otter on the back. So maybe you're noticing some subtle differences already between the two species, and I'm hoping by the end of this presentation you guys are going to be expert otter spotters with some of the tips I'm going to give you. So I'll pass this around. The pictures are labeled so you guys can kind of get that visual in your mind. So, did anyone see an otter, by the way, on their trip? See otters? No otters? They must be. Sorry? In the aquarium, you saw some, yes. Okay, so otter spotter tip number one, where can we find them? So we'll start with our sea otters, and also feel free to say aw throughout any of my presentation because we may get that version at some point. So, our sea otters really like to hang out in the open ocean, especially off of Tofino sometimes, and they like to hang out in this smelly, soupy stuff. And they're not just hanging out there for the smell, I can guarantee that. What they're doing there is they are protecting themselves from some of our larger marine predators that we've got up here. This is the orca or killer whale. Now, there are a few types, but one of the types that the sea otters have to worry about in particular are the transient orcas. Those are the ones that travel around everywhere. They like to eat things like bats, so they like other dolphins, even whales and seals, and unfortunately for the sea otter, they are also on this killer whale's menu. So they have to hide out in the kelp forest to protect themselves. Another reason they spend so much time in the kelp forest is because their favorite fruit also happens to live there. How convenient. Does anyone know what this is? Sea urchin, very good. You guys are playing like a game here. And another reason why the sea otters like to spend so much time in the kelp forest, especially the mother sea otters, because they have their pups, but sometimes when they want to go hunt for those sea urchins, they can't always take them with her. So what she does, she wraps her babies up in kelp, tells them to stay put, don't go anywhere, goes and hunts for those sea urchins and comes back and picks up her baby right where she left it. So it's kind of a nice free babysitting service as well for these otters. And I can pass this around as well if you guys would like to look. There you go. Okay, so that was our sea otters, where we can find them. What about these guys? I should forget these guys. Our river otters. So this one looks like this. So the river otters can be found in rivers, as their name would suggest, but also in lakes, in estuaries, even the open ocean. So these guys are pretty special because they can survive both in saltwater and freshwater. So pretty neat. We've got them all the way up here on the coast in the ocean to a lake in Alberta, which is everywhere in between. And these guys can spend way more time on land than the sea otters do. And they're built for that. We'll get into that a little bit later. And they like to make their dens where they sleep by the shore, so they can access those below or above the water. All right, otter spotter tip number two. When you see an otter, or a sea otter, they're going to be in this position, they'll be on their backs a lot, whether they're spot where they wrap themselves in kelp just to lay there and take a nap so they don't drift away. They're going to spend a lot of time in this position. Whereas when you see a river otter in the water, they're going to be swimming belly down most of the time. They'll have their little heads poking out above the surface, and they can be kind of shy. So if they know that you've seen them, they might dive down head first under the water. And people might be concerned because they don't come up right away for air. And everyone's like, oh, where's the river otter go? Well, these guys have special flaps that they can close over their ears and their nose that allows them to hold their breath and stay under the water for upwards of 8 minutes. So the river otter was full of water, doesn't come back up. You don't have to worry at all. All right, my third otter spotter tip for you is the difference in size between the two species. So this works out pretty well. I didn't plan this, but this is good because sea otters are way bigger than river otters. So sea otters range between 50 to 100 pounds, so about the size of a German Shepherd, if you're familiar with that breed of dog. Pretty big. And the river otters are only about 20 to 25 pounds, so they're quite a bit small. So I'm hoping with those few startup tips, you feel a little more confident. Now, I do have a bonus tip for you guys. I don't know if you, when you woke up this morning, you thought about what an otter's teeth might look like. I don't know if that was just me because of your presentation today. Am I alone in that? Yeah, I figured, I expected that. So I have two skulls here, one representing each of the otter species that we just talked about. So I've got a sea otter and a river otter. Now I just mentioned some size differences, which is evident here in their skulls. So which one do you think is the sea otter skull? We're pointing over here, majority. Yes, very good, you're listening. So this is the sea otter skull, the much larger of the two. And I want to talk about teeth because we've got molars in our mouth and they're relatively flat. I don't know if you've checked out your own teeth before, but if you look in sea otter's mouth, their molars, or the teeth at the back, actually look a bit like human molars. And that's because they're doing a lot of the same actions that we're doing, a lot of chewing, a lot of grinding, they're pushing down that crab or that urchin. So that's why their teeth will look a lot like ours, whereas if you look at the river otter right here, you'll see that they have much pointier, sharper teeth. And that's because they're feeding on things like a fish most of the time, so they're doing it more. All right, my second and final story of the day is a story of changing coastal ecosystems. So step one, I've got my sea otter, and step two, I need us as an audience to do some time travel today on the deck. So I'd like us to go back to the 1800s. And if we look down on the coast in the 1800s, we would have found thousands and thousands of sea otters. They would have been everywhere. Even that would have been true of Alaska, BC, California, Mexico, all the way down the coast. And with all of those sea otters, we also would have had a lot of this stuff, which I mentioned earlier in my presentation that sea otters love. Do you guys remember what that was? Kelp, that's right, very good. So we would have had even more luscious kelp forests along the coast. So lots of kelp, lots of otters, things looking good in the 1800s. But then something changed because the fur traders came to town and they kind of shook things up, but not in a good way. So they discovered very quickly that sea otters have really nice fur, and it's true. They've got the thickest fur of any mammal in the entire world, so about 1 million hairs per square inch. Very impressive because that's 10 times the amount of hair we have in our whole head in that very small square inch. So very impressive. Now I could probably, talk for the next 20 minutes about how soft and how special and how desirable this fur is. But being a naturalist has its perks, I gotta say. Because I have a few pieces of real sea otter fur that I can pass out to you, so I don't have to go on and on about how awesome it is. You can just experience it for yourself. That would be a lot better. I'll trade you here. Here we go. You guys want to go here? There you go. And if you don't get to feel it right away, please feel free to come over after the presentation as well. So unfortunately, this fur was so desirable that the fur traders went a little crazy. And if you looked out on the coast by 1929, you wouldn't have been able to find a single sea otter. They were all gone and all hunted to virtual extinction in British Columbia. So people were concerned about this because they noticed, hey, we're losing our sea otters, we don't have any more. But for some reason, we're also starting to lose all of our kelp along the coastline. Now people were wondering, what's the link? Is there a link between these two things? And it turns out that just laying there in the kelp, eating their favorite food. Sounds pretty nice, right? But they were actually performing a very important function, because when all the sea otters were gone and hunted, the sea urchin population exploded because there wasn't really anything around to eat them, and these guys multiply very fast. But what people didn't know was that urchins really love to eat kelp. So this was a problem, because nibble by nibble, urchin by urchin, they would feed on the whole fast of the kelp, which is what roots the kelp to the bottom of the ocean. So one by one, the kelp strands were just getting uprooted and ending up on the beach. And they're not very useful other than a skipping rope for a few minutes on the beach. So people were very concerned about losing this kelp, because kelp is one of the most diverse ecosystems in the whole world. It's home to thousands and thousands of species. And we also harvest kelp for a lot of our common household products. We've got kelp in our ice cream and our toothpaste, just to give you some very extreme examples. So we realized quickly that we had to do some damage control and we needed to get back our otters. So we went to Alaska, because they still had some sea otters. So we kind of knocked on their door and we said, hey, Alaska, do you mind if we borrow some of your sea otters? Because we're really struggling here in BC. So they said, all right, we'll give you 85 of our finest, and you can release them back onto the coast. So that was in about 1970. And as of 2008, and the current estimate is hovering at about 5,000 sea otters in British Columbia. So we went from 85 all the way up to 5,000.